This is a video on how to do secure copy, or SCP. First, we'll look at just some shortcuts as you're doing this command. Remember that your personal home directory can be referenced by a tilde. For example, you can do a cd space tilde and always take you to your home directory. So that can also be useful when you're doing an SCP command. The shortcut for your current working directory can also be represented by a period or a dot or a dot slash. So try it. You could do a cd dot or ls dot, and it will give you a directory listing or cd you to the same directory you're in. It's kind of silly to do for a cd command, but ls does the same thing as ls dot for the current directory. But for an SCP command, it can be particularly useful, as I will demonstrate in a minute. So when you're doing a normal copy command, think of a normal copy command. You've got a source, you've got a destination. Well, with a secure copy or SCP command, you also have a source and a destination. And this source and or destination address has could have the following format. You could have a username in there, the @sign, the machine name you want it to copy to, then a colon. This is your path separator that separates it from all this stuff from the actual path where you're going to copy stuff to. So in that path, number 5, can be an absolute address or a relative address relative to your home directory. Make more sense when we do some examples. Now here's some long address examples. So cstand or at scratch.cs.dixie.edu:/var hunt lion.tar. Notice username at machine name path. Notice the colon that's separating that. You could also have instead an IP address. Here's another one. Joe at some IP address :tilde. This is the location of my home directory. Or this one says, remember dot over on the remote machine, it's always going to start at your home directory anyway. So this says go to my home directory, but then go to the examples inside of my home directory. This one, same thing. This will go to the same location as that second line up there. And then another example of an absolute path. So to SCP from my machine to another machine, you can start where your file directory is located. Make sure you're in that directory. So you can do ls and you can see it. Confirm your destination machine by using start typing this command, or you could SSH over to the remote machine and make sure you can log into it. But if you're comfortable doing the SSH command, fine, don't do it. Then the SCP command is going to be very similar to that, except we're going to say, all right, let's take my file that's in my local present working directory, and we're going to SSH it over to one of those long paths like we shared in the last slide. Finally, if I was from a distant machine to my current machine, so notice the difference. From my machine to another machine, well, let's say that I'm on my local machine and I want to copy it from that remote machine to the current machine. Okay, so once again, cd to the location where you want that file to end up at. You can SSH over to that machine again to make sure everything works, but the command you care about is SCP, and then notice I put that full path again, so go over to that other machine, grab this file, and then dot says put it in my current working directory. The next video will have some examples. Example for SCP. So here I have a file called animals. Remember, Linux file names don't really care if they have an extension or not. I want to take this and copy it to a remote machine. So I'm going to say SCP and animals, and I'm going to copy it over to a remote machine. Now I can give it the full qualified domain name, and then I'm going to copy it in my home directory over there. So that's why I did the dot slash. Now dot, same thing. Tilde is the same thing. Put it in my home directory over there. For some reason, I've gotten the habit of doing this because that's easier for me to type than a tilde. So I can type that, yes, and then I would type in my password, and it copied it over there. So 100% means everything was successfully copied. Now I'm going to remove animals here. You can see that it doesn't exist. I'm going to copy it back now from that same remote machine. Well, I'm going to go scp joe@yavin.cs.dixie.edu. Go find in my home directory, find the file called animals, and this last dot says, after you find it, copy it over here to this current working directory. So once again, ask me for my password again, and it'll copy back over here. Now, these paths that I'm showing you, those are both been relative paths, relative to my home directory, but they can both be absolute if I want to. Instead of putting it in my current working directory, maybe I'll go put it over here in some directory called /tmp, absolute directory. And it did that. So now I can count out temp animals and it's there.